In the frozen expanse of Siberia, where the Arctic winds howl and permafrost grips the earth, a bold vision emerged from the mind of Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev in the 1950s. The project to reverse the rivers aimed to divert the great Siberian rivers, Yakutsk Lena, the Kolyma, the Indigirka, and others, from their natural northward flow toward the Arctic Ocean. Instead, they would be rerouted southward to Central Asia, transforming arid deserts into fertile farmland. This was no mere fantasy. It was a calculated attempt to solve two crises at once: the oversaturation of Siberia's tundra and the water-starved deserts of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. The project, formerly called the Soviet Grand Canal, required engineering on a scale never before attempted. Canals 3,000 kilometers long, massive pumping stations, and the forced relocation of entire communities. But as we'll explore, the dream of taming nature for human ambition came at a staggering cost.
To understand the audacity of this project, we must first grasp the scale of Siberia's rivers. The Lena, Yana, and Indigirka rivers alone carry more water than the Amazon, over 5,000 cubic meters per second during peak spring thaws. Yet 90% of this water flows north into the Arctic, locked in seasonal ice for months. Meanwhile, Central Asia's Syr-Darya and Amu Darya rivers were already being overexploited for cotton fields, creating ecological disasters like the shrinking Aral Sea. The Soviet engineers envisioned a colossal network of canals, locks, and reservoirs to harness Siberia's excess water. Key to the plan was the construction of the Kolyma Diversion, a 600-kilometer canal that would siphon meltwater from the Kolyma River, one of the coldest rivers on Earth, and redirect it through newly built aqueducts towards Kazakhstan. The project's architects, led by engineer Vladimir Strelkov, claimed it could irrigate 50 million hectares of land, equivalent to the size of France. But how feasible was this in the frozen wilderness?
The logistics were staggering. To carve canals through Siberia's permafrost, engineers developed new techniques to melt and excavate frozen soil using steam drills. Over 500,000 laborers, many conscripted from the Soviet workforce, were deployed to construction sites in the 1960s. They worked in temperatures as low as -50 degrees Celsius, battling frostbite and equipment failures. One of the most ambitious components was the Arctic Divide Tunnel, a 120-kilometer subterranean passage through the Taimyr Peninsula to connect northern Siberia to the Central Canal System. The Soviets even considered using nuclear explosives, as in their nuclear explosions for the National Economy Program, to blast through rock formations. By 1975, 200 kilometers of canals had been completed, including the first 20-kilometer stretch of the Kolyma Diversion. Yet for every kilometer built, the costs spiraled. The project consumed 3% of the Soviet Union's annual industrial budget by the late 1970s, money that could have funded space programs or consumer goods. Why did the USSR persist with this madness?
The Soviet leadership had a simple equation: water equals food equals power. With the Sino-Soviet split and Western embargoes limiting grain imports, Khrushchev saw the river project as a way to feed millions and assert dominance over nature. Yet the politics of the project were as turbulent as its engineering. When Khrushchev was ousted in 1964, the new leader, Leonid Brezhnev, scaled back the project, fearing it would become a symbol of his predecessor's hubris. By the 1980s, Mikhail Gorbachev's reforms exposed the project's inefficiencies. Only 12% of the planned canals existed. But the most damning revelation came from scientists. The disruption of Siberian river ecosystems would release millions of tons of methane from thawing permafrost, accelerating global warming. This unintended consequence, now understood as a major climate threat, was ignored by the Politburo in their rush to build. The story of the reversed rivers is not just about engineering, it's about the collision of ideology and ecology.
Let's examine the human cost. The villages of the Taimyr Peninsula were among the first to feel the impact. In 1968, the government ordered the relocation of the Evenki people, nomadic hunters who had lived along the Yana River for centuries. Their reindeer pastures were flooded to create the first reservoirs. Official records state 1,200 families were displaced, though activists claimed the number was over 3,000. In the city of Yakutsk, engineers faced a unique problem. The permafrost beneath the proposed canal sites would melt as soon as the water flowed. To prevent this, they constructed thermopile foundations, vertical pipes that radiated cold air to keep the ground frozen. But these only worked in summer. Winter ice buildup caused structural failures. The human toll was equally severe. A 1972 internal report revealed that 12% of workers on the Kolyma diversion suffered from chronic lung disease due to silica dust from drilling. The project's defenders called it a necessary sacrifice for the greater good. But to the Evenki and laborers, it was a forced march into oblivion.
The ecological fallout began years before the first shovel hit the ground. In 1965, Soviet hydrologists warned that diverting the Lena River would disrupt the delicate balance of the Laptev Sea ecosystem, affecting species like the endangered beluga whale. These warnings were ignored. By 1980, satellite data showed that the construction sites had already altered regional weather patterns, creating microclimates that shortened the permafrost thaw season by 15%. But the most alarming discovery came from the Vostok Station in Antarctica. Soviet Ice Core research, conducted in the same years, revealed that burning fossil fuels was raising global temperatures. Yet the Politburo saw no contradiction in building a $25 billion river diversion project. This disconnect between science and policy persists today. The abandoned canals of Siberia now serve as a grim monument to the dangers of technocratic arrogance. What remains of the project?
Today, the remnants of the project are scattered across Siberia like scars on the earth. The Kolyma diversion's incomplete canal now serves as a seasonal drainage ditch for nearby gold mines. In the village of Oymyakon, the coldest inhabited settlement on Earth, -50°C winters, local guides show tourists the rusting remains of a pumping station that once aimed to raise water 300 meters against gravity. The most intact structure is the Stalin Embankment in Novosibirsk, a 12-kilometer concrete wall originally built to test river diversion techniques. Now it prevents erosion along the Ob River. The most ironic fate belongs to the Arctic Divide Tunnel. In the 1990s, it was repurposed as a methane gas pipeline, transporting the very resource the river project would have released into the atmosphere. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 before its grandest folly could reach completion. But its legacy endures in our modern debates about geoengineering and climate
a
intervention.
new proposal emerged
Should
from
we
the
still
Russian state
consider
agency
projects like this to
Rosnano,
combat droughts?
revive the River Reversal Project using nanotechnology to reinforce permafrost. Scientists claim that injecting silica nanoparticles into the ground could mimic the old thermopile system, but with 80% greater efficiency. Private investors, including energy firms from Kazakhstan and China, have shown interest in funding a 21st-century version of the project. Yet the climate science has advanced. We now know that even a partial reversal of Siberian rivers could release 5 gigatons of carbon, equivalent to 10 years of global emissions. The Evenki people, now a protected minority, have petitioned UNESCO to declare the abandoned canals a cultural landscape of technological overreach. Their oral histories recall the floods that destroyed their reindeer herds and the silence of the birds after the first test diversions. As we stand at this crossroads, we must ask, is the human
The story
desire
of the
to
reversed
fix nature
rivers
through
teaches
engineering
us that the
a
Earth
blessing
is not a
or curse?
machine to be reprogrammed at will. For every problem solved, nature offers new challenges. The Soviet Union's dream of controlling water to feed the world became a cautionary tale about the limits of human power. Today, as we face climate-driven droughts, the temptation to engineer solutions remains strong, but the ghosts of Siberia's canals whisper a warning. Sometimes the greatest wisdom lies in working with nature, not against it. The abandoned ditches of the Kolyma, the rusting pumps of Oymyakon, and the silent graves of the Evenki people remind us that the rivers know their own way, and in the end, the Arctic Divide, both literal and metaphorical, remains a chasm too great for any one generation to cross.